strike me as like the garage when somebody says this, and you know what, that also means this. It's a very creative guy, and it's developed it. It's really thought about what he's talking about. Very, very well documented the points he's making about how all this is happening, and develops a lot of sensible hypotheses. But then he does something that almost everybody outside of cognitive psychology does, and what we will try to be training ourselves not to do. And that is, because the hypotheses are sensible, because they explain what he sees happening, they must be true. Now, this one is going to be our first part. Most of us form our beliefs by thinking about life or thinking about some parts of our life until we come up with an idea that explains it. That's it. That's it. That explains everything. Just because a belief or an idea explains things does not mean it's true. It doesn't even have anything to do. Why does a belief explaining everything? Well, let me phrase that a little differently. If a belief explains everything we're wondering about, why is that belief not necessarily true?
Perception.
Perception is where it comes from, but what I'm asking about is why is that explanation not necessarily accurate or true if it fits everything we see? What were you going to say?
No, I said it's just a belief, and there's not anything back it up.
It explains everything. How would you test it?
There's sometimes unusual circumstances where it won't work.
That might be. It may explain everything. Now we're getting at how you would find out if it's true. But what I'm saying is, just because, I got it. I got a brilliant idea that explains everything. That may be worth it. That may not. That does not. Just because it explains everything does not mean the idea is true. The reason is there are probably 10 or 20 or 100 other beliefs, totally different beliefs that explain everything just as well.
That's what I meant by perception.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I have an idea, the first one that explains all of the stuff that's really been puzzling me. I grasp onto and I say, that must be correct. And that's what I believe. But the problem is, you've been wondering about all the same stuff, and you think of some other explanation for it that explains it just as well. And you say, that must be it. I have my idea that I'm just sure of because it explains everything to me. You have your idea, which you're totally sure of because it explains everything to you, but they're totally different ideas about the same thing. And usually there are 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 different ideas about the same thing that do indeed explain it very well, but they can't all be right because they're totally different. Here's what you have to do, and we'll get to this in more detail later in the course. Let's say there are 5 ideas, 5 hypotheses that equally well explain everything. You can't prove any of those ideas is right because all you can do is have them predict something and it comes true. But if it predicts something and it comes true, that doesn't prove it's right. Maybe this one could have made the same prediction and it comes true. This one made the same prediction and it comes true. Maybe this one made the same prediction and it comes true. Testing your idea by having it make a prediction and the prediction coming true does not only does it not prove the idea is right, it has nothing to do with those ideas right. Because there are always many other ideas that could have made the same prediction. And we have an instinctive tendency to go with that. I think it's instinctive. That is, it explains everything, it makes predictions, and the predictions come true, of course it's right. How could it not be? Well, because there are lots of other ideas that would have done the same thing. So we have these 5 ideas, all of which explain everything, all of which make predictions that come true. How are we going to tell the difference? We have to prove them wrong. We can't prove that they're all right. We can't prove any of them are right because you just can't. There's always a possibility you haven't thought of. So we think of everything we can think of, and we can then do some tests where we predict, if this one makes a prediction and it doesn't come true, well, we know that one's wrong. This one makes a prediction and it doesn't come true, well, we know that's wrong. We can't prove ideas, but we can disprove them. So what we have to do is think of all of the ideas we can think of and disprove them until we find one that we can't disprove. And that's the one that we go with. That's not a very, that's going to sound like a very satisfying approach, but that's what science is all about. Science doesn't ever prove anything. It just disproves all the other alternatives. The basic strategy, you got an idea you want to test, have it make a specific prediction. If that prediction doesn't come true, you know the idea is wrong and you can throw it away. All scientists do is disprove things and throw them away. They never prove anything. They get down to one idea left, so that's the one that we're going to go with now until somebody thinks of something else, and then we'll have to test them, see which one we can do. That doesn't sound right, does it? Doesn't sound very truthy, you might say. It's very hard to get your idea, your head around that, but if you think about it, it's really true. The only way you can test the belief is put it in a situation where it could be wrong, it's not, and all the others are. That's really the best you can do. The only thing wrong that finds in this book is he doesn't do that. He doesn't do the last stuff. He comes up with really good, plausible, believable hypotheses that explains a lot, and then he stops. He acts like that's all he has to do, which is what 98% of the world does. That's the only thing that is that's wrong here, and we'll come back to that when we talk about decision making. Does that make any sense? Yep. So anyway, in spite of that, we'll forgive him making. I should have beaten her, Angel. we'll forgive the last stuff. But anyway, I really like the book. It kind of disappeared from sight, but nevertheless, if you want to read in your life one popular book on cognitive psychology, I say go with that. Got 2 more. Oh, actually, I cut this one out. Brought the wrong disc. Well, anyway, you know Al Gore. He wrote a book on and talks about how we make decisions emotionally rather than rationally. He argues that when we do the snap decisions rather than rational decisions, is when we're afraid. The climate of fear produces a lot of snap decisions that we don't think through. And there's some truth to that. He blames television. Television by its nature. Television shows make money if they make you afraid. If you watch interesting news stories, what makes news stories interesting? Well, the world was nice and rosy today, so now we'll go to commercial. That's not what you're going to watch. You're going to watch, oh no, the oceans are rising and they're at your back door. TV is in the business of making you fearful, and that's okay, and it's entertaining. Everybody likes war movies, but it also, he says, creates a climate where we don't think. We never, even in those times when we need to be thinking, we don't.
a lot of people have said that there was one man who, I'm talking about holidays here, that one man who ruined Halloween forever. The man named Ronald O'Brien who poisoned his son on Halloween 1974, and people have said that ever since then, a lot of parents have been scared to death, scared to take their kids out trick-or-treating because they're convinced that there are a lot of adults out there who are going to poison their kids or put razor blades and needles and such in their
There is a lot of that, and that's
Yeah.
the kind of thing.
And the thing is, they've said, according to one website, that Halloween has practically been sanitized out of existence because of the unnecessary fears that parents, adults have, other adults have.
My kids are grown now; they're in their late 20s. But here in Edinburgh, when they were little, it's like there were designated areas, and people would go to particular blocks, which everybody thought were safe, but everything else was, just like you're saying. I noticed nobody came by my house. But yeah, that's a good example. In this one, I said I wasn't gonna. This was getting kind of outdated, and I intended to take it out, but then I brought the wrong file. The kid's cognitive psychology in the first chapter was pretty good, but then he just wanders off describing things that happen without talking about why they happen. So I wasn't real crazy about it. But 2 alderages for a good start. And now we got a couple more. This one, the reason I want to show you this one is there is one tradition in cognitive psychology. Everybody I've been talking about so far has been people who came from other kinds of experimental psychology and studied cognition. Another pathway is people who study language, which is a kind of cognition. Start studying other kinds of cognition, and what they end up doing is applying a lot of ideas from linguistics, from the study of language, to other kinds of thinking, and that's what this guy does. He says, and this is not an argument that's totally foreign to cognitive psychology, is that we're going to ask, what does it mean when you understand something? One thing that happens when you understand something is that you match it to something in your head. You recognize something as a basketball game because you have kind of an outline in your head of what a basketball game is, what the properties of it are, and this thing you're seeing matches that idea, so you recognize it as a basketball game.
Schema?
A schema, yes, exactly. The schema is the term for something like that people who come into cognition from other areas of psychology usually use. People who come in from linguistics talk about it as a narrative. They think it's that our ideas are better conceptualized. We all have these cultural stories, these cultural damsel in distress, knight in shining armor, creepy, weaselly thief. We all have these little stories in our heads that we organize the world around. And when we see something out there happening, we look for a story that fits into. We look for a cultural story that we have in our minds and think of this as an example of that story, which he refers to as narratives. And that's he's talking about politics in terms of narratives, understanding politics in terms of narratives. But that's a common idea in general in cognitive psychology. And he makes the point, which is usually made from this point of view, if I have a different point of view than you do, that means when I see something happen, when I see poor people, I may incorporate that into a laziness, worthlessness, doesn't want to work narrative, or you may incorporate it into an exploited, terrible life, needs a lot of help narrative. What's out there is exactly the same, but our difference of opinion depends on what narrative we incorporate it into. And one example, this was, he used Hillary Clinton as an example when she was running against Obama, when she was running for president in the Democratic primary. These don't quite fit so well now because she's probably the most well-respected person in Washington. But at the time, she was a presidential candidate, and people saw her in a lot of different ways. One common narrative she was fit into was the long-suffering life narrative because she was married to Bill. Everybody knows, I suppose, about Bill. Antics, shall we say. Okay. She put up with it. She stood by him. We have a cultural narrative of a long-suffering life that will tolerate that. So that's how a lot of people saw her. Other people saw her not so much as an injured but long-suffering wife, because she understood. She's just a very competent, deserving woman who really is worthy of a lot of admiration. That's a different narrative. We're talking about the same objective person up there, but we see her differently depending on the narrative we incorporate those observations into. A third one was calculating pitch. Which a lot of people saw her as, oh, come on, give me a break. She knows exactly what she's doing. She knows exactly what she's doing. We're talking about exactly the same person who some people see this way, some people see this way, some people see this way. Not because of anything to do with the person, but because of which cultural narrative she's matched against. And he does a pretty good job of explaining that. But then he starts saying stuff like, we know from cognitive science and neuroscience that such narratives are fixed in the neural circuits of our brain. What? What? I don't know that. Where did he get that? He didn't get it anywhere. He just, really good book, really good ideas, really clearly explained, and then he just starts making stuff up. That's another kind of occupational hazard in cognitive psychology. Everybody is a cognitive psychologist. I have a heart, but that doesn't make me a cardiologist. I have a brain, so that makes me a psychologist. People work that way a lot. So, anyway, some good things about the book, some bad things about the book that cancel it out.
Only two? Only two?
Only two. This kind of stuff just drives me nuts. That's the college professor in me. Don't say that, you're just making up. What else we got? Okay, this one is this is a type of approach. This is an area of applied cognition that has been around for several years, several decades now, and that is applying it to economics, to the study of economics. This guy, Ariely, has a PhD in cognitive psychology, and in his spare time, he got a PhD in economics, too. I don't know, there wasn't anything on TV or something. So he's an expert in both of these fields. And what he says is that economists, almost all economics theories, assume rationality on the part of people in making economic decisions, and that's just not true. And that really is right. I was I was doing a paper at a convention in Atlantic City, New Jersey last April, but it was a broad social sciences thing. So while I already knew about psychology, I'm going to go learn about economics. So I went and sat through a session on economics paper. And they were brilliant. You know, there are all these equations about what made people choose one kind of energy rather than another kind of energy with all of these constants and variables and integrals and stuff. Except they all assumed that what people did was as function of the information they got and rational decisions that they made on the basis of that information. And after like the fourth one, I said, those aren't people. That's not how people think. That's not what people do. And a couple of guys sitting next to me said, yeah, we got some of those in economics too. But this is one guy like that. Economics have, economists tend to have a strong assumption of rationality for predicting what people will do. And they look at the information. If people make bad economic decisions, well, why would rational people make bad economic decisions? Well, we have bad information. Or there were other constraints operating on them that caused them to arrive at the wrong decisions. He's saying, and there's just a huge amount of information supporting this, that no, people don't make rational economic decisions. It's the fundamental characteristic of a human being that we make economic decisions on the basis of things other than logic. And so what he's saying is that there's like this fundamental flaw running through economics that assumes rationality in beings that just are not rational, at least when it comes to economic decisions. We'll get to that later, too.
So what you're saying is basically economics is not really capturing the complexity of the human individual.
The four economics papers, in my experience, did not. Yeah, that's exactly right. But no, that's what he's saying. That's exactly right. And there have been the only psychologist in history who has gotten the Nobel Prize at that time, this is about 1980, got it for showing the irrationality in economic decision. And it was considered such a breakthrough. I mean, that's been kind of a bedrock belief in psychology, that it was such a breakthrough idea in economics. He actually got the Nobel Prize in economics for it. But yes, what you said is exactly right. This one, it's really easy to read. He really does a good job of explaining economics. Economics is a very technical and arcane world, and he does a very good job of explaining it to us down here on Earth. It's an extension, like I said, it's an extension of ideas that have been around since the 1980s, but he does a very good job of it, and I gave him. Okay, well, there are other books. There are other books around. Now, like I said, this has really gotten to be kind of a fad the last 10 years or so, and they're usually pretty good. There's a lot of competition out there for books of this type, and the ones that make it to market and become bestsellers usually are pretty good. So if you're just interested in some of this at this level, out of general interest, I could pick some of them up and read them. Let's stop there. What I want to do get into some issues about, I just said you got to test ideas and prove them wrong.